I slowly disconnected from my stepson's life, just to see if he'd notice. He didn't. Years passed in silence. Then his wife suddenly called, accusing me of abandoning them. She had no idea what I'd already set in motion, or what that call was about to cost them. Before I tell you exactly how everything unfolded, and why that phone call changed the balance of power forever, take a moment to support this channel. Subscribe, and leave a comment about where you're watching from. It helps stories like mine reach people who might need them. I'm 77 years old. My name is Walter Grayson, and I've lived long enough to understand that neglect doesn't always come with cruelty. Sometimes it comes wrapped in politeness, excuses, and time. Lots of time. I became a stepfather later than most men do. When I married Evelyn, her son Caleb was already an adult with his own opinions, habits, and distance. I didn't try to replace his father. I didn't push my way into his life. I believed respect was earned through consistency, not demands. So that's what I did. I showed up, quietly, reliably. I helped with repairs around his house. When he bought his first place, I loaned money once, only once, and never brought up again when he paid it back late. I watched his wedding from the second row and clapped when everyone else did. When Evelyn fell ill, I was the one at every appointment, every pharmacy run, every sleepless night. Caleb visited when he could, or when it was convenient. I told myself that was enough. After Evelyn passed, the space she left behind was bigger than the house. Caleb and his wife Hannah promised we'd stay close. Promises like that are easy to make when grief is fresh and guilt is loud. They fade once life settles back into routine. At first, the change was subtle. Calls that came later than usual. Invitations that arrived already half decided. I was always welcome on paper. In reality, I was optional. I noticed things other people might not. How holidays shifted from what you're doing to we already have plans, but maybe next time. How birthdays became text messages sent hours before midnight. How conversations turned shallow, rushed polite. The kind of politeness that says, I've done my part. I didn't confront them. I didn't complain. I'd spent my life working, raising a family, surviving losses. I wasn't about to beg for relevance. So I did something simple. I stopped reaching first. No dramatic goodbye. No announcement. I just let the silence do what silence does best. Reveal the truth. Weeks passed. Then months. Then years. 6 of them. In that time, I moved out of the old house in Brookhaven. Too many memories. Too many quiet corners where Evelyn used to sit. I sold it, downsized, and relocated to a modest apartment near the river in Ohio. I donated furniture. Threw out boxes I've been carrying for decades. I simplified my life in ways that felt long overdue. Caleb never asked where I went. Hannah never checked in. Not once did either of them ask if I was all right, if I needed help, if I was lonely. Not a single "Are you okay?" crossed my phone. And that told me everything. I built a new routine. Morning walks. A small group of friends at the community center. Volunteering twice a week. I learned to enjoy my own company in a way I never had before. The quiet no longer felt hollow. It felt earned. Then, one afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick it up. Walter? A woman's voice said, sharp, already irritated. Yes, I replied. This is Hannah, Caleb's wife. No greeting. No hesitation. Straight to business. We need to talk, she said. Caleb's been trying to reach you. That alone was a lie. My call log was empty. You disappeared, she continued. You can't just cut family off like that. Do you have any idea how confusing that's been for us? For us. Not once did she ask why. Not once did she wonder how a man in his 70s ends up alone and unnoticed for years. I listened, quietly, let her talk herself into exhaustion. When she finally paused, waiting for me to apologize, I said, You didn't notice I was gone. There was a beat of silence. That's not fair, she snapped. You never said anything. Neither did you, I thought. What Hannah didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that during those silent years, I'd done more than just step back. I'd paid attention. I'd learned things. about money, about promises, about how quickly people show their true priorities when they think you're no longer watching. I didn't argue with her on the phone. I didn't defend myself. I simply told her I'd think about whether I wanted to talk further. She ended the call irritated, clearly believing she still had the upper hand. She was wrong. That call wasn't a confrontation. It was a trigger, and by the time Caleb realized what reconnecting with me actually meant, there would be no way for him to undo it. Not after what I'd already prepared. And that was only the beginning. After Hannah's call, I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry. Anger burns hot and fast. What kept me awake was something colder. Calculation. The kind that comes from years of watching people underestimate you. I didn't rush to call Caleb back. I didn't text Hannah. Silence has a way of unsettling people who are used to control. Instead, I went about my routine like nothing had happened. Morning walk, coffee by the window, volunteering at the community center. On the surface, my life looked unchanged. Underneath, I was putting pieces into place. You see, when you live quietly for long enough, people assume you're doing nothing. They forget that quiet men still think, still remember, still notice patterns others overlook. During the years Caleb barely acknowledged me, I kept my distance, but I never lost awareness. I still received the occasional forwarded email meant for him that he forgot to remove me from. I still got bank notifications from an old joint account we kept open after Evelyn passed, one I hadn't touched in years. I still heard things through mutual acquaintances who assumed I was in the loop. Caleb had grown careless. The first thing I did was call my attorney, not a divorce lawyer or anything dramatic, an estate and financial specialist I'd worked with when I sold the Brookhaven house. A sharp woman, calm voice, no wasted words. I explained the situation without emotion. She listened, then asked one question. What do you want the outcome to be? I want to protect myself, I said, and I want the truth documented. She told me to come in the next morning. That meeting lasted 3 hours. We went through everything: assets, accounts, permissions, beneficiaries. Turns out, some of the things Caleb assumed were by default weren't. Other things he'd been using? Technically questionable. Not illegal yet, but close enough to make a man nervous if the right people started asking questions. Next, I reviewed my own records. Old emails, bank statements, notes I'd scribbled over the years when something didn't sit right. A withdrawal here, a vague explanation there. I hadn't confronted him then because I trusted him, or thought I did. Trust is a long memory. 2 days after Hannah's call, Caleb finally reached out himself. A voicemail. Casual tone. Too casual. Hey, Walter. Hannah mentioned she talked to you. We should catch up. Clear the air. Call me when you can. Clear the air. That phrase always irritates me. It usually means someone wants to move past something without acknowledging what caused it. I waited another day before responding. When I did, it was a single text. I'm available Friday at 3. 1 hour. Public place. He replied almost instantly. Sure. Looking forward to it. That eagerness told me more than his words ever could. Friday came. I arrived early at a quiet cafe downtown. Sat where I could see the door. Old habit. When Caleb walked in, he looked confident, too confident. Like a man who thought he still had leverage. We exchanged pleasantries. He ordered coffee. I didn't. He launched into it quickly. Hannah was pretty upset. She thought you were angry. I wasn't angry, I said. I was absent. He frowned, not liking the distinction. You could have said something, he replied. We didn't know you wanted space. That was my opening. For 6 years, I said evenly, you didn't notice I stopped calling. Didn't notice I moved. Didn't notice I wasn't at holidays. And now you're telling me you didn't know. He shifted in his chair. Defensive now. Life got busy, he said. Marriage, work, stress. The usual excuses people use when they don't want to say, you weren't important enough. I listened, let him talk, let him explain himself into a corner. Then I asked, why now? He hesitated. That pause told me everything. Finally, he said, we're just trying to reconnect. Family matters. I nodded slowly. Family does matter. Then I slid an envelope across the table. His eyes dropped to it. Inside were copies. Documents. Not accusations. Facts. Transactions. Authorizations. Things I knew he'd forgotten about. He went still. I'm not here to argue, I continued. I'm here to set boundaries. His voice dropped. What is this? Protection, I said. For me. The meeting ended early. He left without finishing his coffee. That night, Hannah called again. This time, her tone was different. Careful. Controlled. I think there's been a misunderstanding, she said. We don't want problems. I don't either, I replied. Silence stretched between us. What do you want? She finally asked. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. I already have it, I said, and ended the call. That was when things escalated. Over the next week, Caleb tried everything. Friendly messages, apologies, guilt. He even hinted at Evelyn, as if invoking her memory might soften me. It didn't. If anything, it hardened my resolve, because Evelyn deserved better than to have her name used as leverage. Then came the mistake. Caleb attempted to access an account he assumed he still had rights to, an account I quietly locked down days earlier. That action triggered alerts, and those alerts set off conversations he wasn't prepared for. By the time he realized what was happening, the situation was no longer between him and me. Other eyes were on it now. Professional ones. Unemotional ones. The kind that don't care about family excuses. Hannah stopped calling. Caleb stopped texting. For a brief moment, everything went quiet again. But this silence was different. This silence meant the trap had closed. And what came next would force them to finally understand something they'd ignored for years. You don't get to forget someone and then demand they come back on your terms. The quiet after Caleb stopped calling should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like the moment right before something breaks. I knew better than to assume it was over. People like Caleb don't back away because they've reflected or grown. They back away because they're scrambling, because they're trying to regain footing after realizing the ground isn't where they thought it was. I was right. 3 days after his last message, my attorney called me early in the morning. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it I'd come to recognize. He tried to move funds, she said, from an account he no longer has access to. I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. Did he succeed? No, but the attempt was logged. That mattered more than the money itself. You see, the account Caleb tried to access wasn't just any account. It was one tied to an old family trust Evelyn, and I had established years ago, long before she got sick. It was meant to cover medical emergencies, elder care if needed, and long-term stability. Caleb had once been listed as a contingent beneficiary, back when trust still existed. That designation had quietly changed when I revised my estate after Evelyn passed. Caleb either didn't know, or assumed I wouldn't notice if he tested the waters. He was wrong. The attempted access triggered compliance alerts. Routine, automatic, emotionless. The kind that doesn't accuse but does document. The kind that creates records that don't disappear. Within 24 hours, my attorney had submitted additional documentation. Nothing aggressive. Nothing dramatic. Just clarification of authority, intent, and boundaries. Caleb, meanwhile, panicked. I found out through Hannah. She called from yet another number. This time, there was no accusation in her voice. No entitlement. Just tension. Walter, she said carefully, we need to talk. Now. I'm listening, I replied. This has gone too far, she said. Caleb didn't mean to cause any trouble. He thought he could do whatever he wanted. I interrupted, my voice steady. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a habit. She inhaled sharply. We're family. No, I said. We were connected. There's a difference. Silence followed. Then she tried a new angle. This could affect his career. There it was. I didn't respond immediately. I let the weight of that statement sit where she could feel it. I haven't contacted his employer, I said finally. I haven't accused him of anything. I've only protected what's mine. But if this goes further, it won't, I said, unless he pushes it. She lowered her voice. What do you want, Walter? The same question. Again, I want distance, I said, and I want it respected. She didn't answer right away. When she did, it was quieter. He didn't think you'd notice. I almost laughed. That sentence, so simple, so careless, summed up everything. He never does, I said, and ended the call. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring out at the river. The water moved steadily, indifferent to all of it. I envied that movement without memory. I thought about the years I'd spent making myself available, about the dinners I'd attended out of obligation, about the silences I'd swallowed to keep the peace. And I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't sad. I was done. The following week, Caleb's lawyer reached out. Polite, professional, vague. They wanted to clarify expectations and avoid unnecessary complications. My attorney handled the response. Firm, precise, unemotional. Caleb would cease all attempts to access accounts or assets not explicitly designated to him. All communication would go through counsel. Any further action would be documented accordingly. In short, stop. 2 days later, I received an email, not from Caleb, but from a financial institution requesting confirmation of updated beneficiary information. Routine, procedural, but I knew what prompted it. Caleb had tried one more door. It hadn't opened. The thing about people who rely on entitlement is that they panic when systems don't bend for them, when rules don't care who they are, when history doesn't grant access. That panic leads to mistakes. The biggest one came a week later. Caleb sent me an email directly. No lawyer, no Hannah, just him. It was long, rambling, defensive. He accused me of punishing him, of rewriting history, of holding grudges. Then he made a claim he couldn't support. He wrote that Evelyn would have wanted things handled differently, that she would have been disappointed in me. That was the line he shouldn't have crossed. I forwarded the email to my attorney without comment. Within 48 hours, Caleb's lawyer was back on the phone, this time with a different tone. Apologetic, careful. They wanted to settle things quietly. Put everything in writing. No escalation. No further disputes. In exchange, Caleb would formally acknowledge the boundaries. No claims. No challenges. No future contact unless initiated by me. It was exactly what I wanted. We finalized it within days. When the papers were signed, I felt something loosen inside my chest. Not victory. Not revenge. Control. Weeks passed without a word from either of them. Then, unexpectedly, I ran into someone who knew them. A mutual acquaintance from Brookhaven. She recognized me at the grocery store and asked how I'd been. I'm well, I said truthfully. She hesitated, then added, I heard things have been tense. I nodded once. That's one way to put it. She lowered her voice. Caleb's been having a rough time. Work issues. Stress. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. I wished her well and walked away. That was when I understood something important. This wasn't about revenge. Revenge is loud, messy, consuming. This was about consequence. I hadn't chased them. I hadn't exposed them publicly. I hadn't raised my voice or made threats. I had simply stopped protecting them from the results of their own behavior. And that was enough. Still, the story wasn't finished. Because sometimes, when people realize they've lost control, they make one last attempt to reclaim it. And Caleb was no exception. The next move would be his boldest, and his final mistake. Caleb's final mistake didn't arrive with shouting or threats. It came quietly, disguised as reason. I was halfway through my morning walk when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I ignored it. A minute later, it buzzed again. Then a text followed. Walter, this is Mark Jennings. I'm representing Caleb. Please call me when you have a moment. It's urgent. Urgent is a word people use when they want control back. I finished my walk, went home, made coffee, and let the phone sit untouched for another hour. When I finally called, Mark answered on the first ring, like he'd been waiting with his hand hovering over the screen. Thank you for calling, he said quickly. I'll get right to it. Caleb wants to resolve things privately, permanently. I thought we already had. I replied. There was a pause. Papers shuffling. A recalibration. Yes, well, Mark continued. New information has come to light. Caleb believed there may have been a misunderstanding regarding intent. He'd like to request a revision. A revision to what? I asked, already knowing the answer. To the agreement. Specifically, the limitations placed on future claims. There it was. I leaned back in my chair and looked out at the river. Calm. Unmoving. Let me guess, I said. He wants options again. Mark cleared his throat. He feels the current arrangement is restrictive. I smiled. It's supposed to be. Mark launched into a practiced explanation. Words like fairness, reconciliation, long-term family harmony. He spoke like someone who believed repetition could wear me down. When he finally stopped, I said, "You should advise your client to stop." Another pause. Longer this time. He's concerned, Mark said carefully, that unresolved matters could attract unwanted attention. That wasn't a request. That was a warning. And it told me everything I needed to know. You're worried about exposure, I said calmly. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. I ended the call without another word. That afternoon, I met with my attorney. She didn't look surprised when I explained what had happened. She nodded, already pulling up files on her tablet. He's trying to regain leverage, she said, which means he's afraid he's lost it. Has he? I asked. She tilted the screen toward me. There it was, a detail I hadn't even needed to use yet. A discrepancy buried deep in records most people assume no one will ever read. A paper trail tied to timing, access, and assumption. Not illegal on its own, but dangerous when connected to intent. Caleb had been playing close to the line for years. The difference now was that the line was visible. We don't need to threaten, my attorney continued. We don't need to accuse. We simply need to make it clear that if he continues, this becomes less private. I nodded. Do it, I said. The letter went out the next morning. Short, professional, devastating in its restraint. It stated that any attempt to revise, challenge, or circumvent the existing agreement would result in a full disclosure of all documented irregularities to relevant institutions. No emotion, no ultimatums, just consequence. That same evening, Hannah called. I almost didn't answer. Almost. Her voice was different this time. No edge, no accusation, just panic barely held together. Walter, she said, please. You don't understand what this could do to us. I understand exactly, I replied. He didn't mean for things to go this far. That's what people say when they're surprised by consequences. She started crying. Real crying this time. Not performative. Desperate. We just wanted things to go back to normal, she said. I was quiet for a moment. Then I said, normal for you is forgetting I existed. Silence. He's not sleeping, she whispered. He's terrified. That was the moment something inside me settled. Not satisfaction. Not pity. Finality. I'm not doing anything to him, I said gently. I stopped doing things for him. That's the difference. She didn't respond. I wish you well, I added, and ended the call. That was the last time either of them contacted me. Weeks passed, then months. No lawyers. No messages. No surprise numbers lighting up my phone. Life returned to its quiet rhythm. But this time, it wasn't the quiet of neglect. It was the quiet of boundaries holding firm. One afternoon, while sorting through old boxes, I found a photo of Evelyn, young, smiling, standing in sunlight like she belonged there. I sat with it for a long time. I didn't fail him, I said aloud, though no one was there to hear it. I just stopped carrying him. And that truth mattered. People talk about revenge like it's an explosion, something loud, dramatic, obvious. But real power doesn't look like that. Real power is choosing when to disengage, when to document, when to stay silent, and when to let systems do what emotions shouldn't. Caleb thought I'd disappeared. He thought silence meant weakness. What he never understood was that silence gave me time. Time to prepare. Time to protect myself. Time to decide that my life, at 77, still mattered enough to defend. I don't hate him. I don't wish him harm. I simply removed myself from the list of people he could use. And that cost him more than he ever expected. If you're listening to this and you're in a place where someone is taking your quiet for granted, where your absence only matters when it inconveniences them, remember this. Walking away isn't losing. Sometimes it's the strongest move you'll ever make. And before I go, if this story resonated with you, support the channel by subscribing and leaving a comment about where you're watching from. It helps stories like mine reach others who might need to hear them. Thank you for listening.